Hello guys, welcome back. Now today, I'm going to be trying predicting which NHL team will be the worst next season in the 2018-2019 season. Now to me, one of the most unpredictable things about the NHL is the NHL standings. So when we talk about NHL standings, especially who will be the worst in the league, it's very hard to actually be right about this. Last year, we were going to talk all about Colorado being the worst team. Oh, maybe it's going to be, some other team, but it ended up being a lot more interesting than we thought it was going to be. Ottawa, of course, went to the Eastern Conference Final, ended up being second last in the league. Guys like Montreal, who were first in their division, ended up missing the playoffs. And the overall standing shakeup from year to year is so much to where predicting this is really hard. Now, I'm going to start today with the New York Rangers, and these are one of the few teams that we know are going to be bad, and they committed to that rebuild. Last season, they had a 39-9 record, and they've been committing to that rebuild. They told their fans they were rebuilding, and of course, they did that pretty majorly at the trade deadline. Their future is looking pretty good with the draft picks and the prospects that they have, but next year, I don't think there's too much hope for them. Maybe some of that defense can recollect themselves, the offense getting a lot better and having a bounce-back season, but I feel like it'll be kind of a lost cause. I don't think the Rangers have enough firepower that they could have if they kept their guys at the trade deadline to make a run at the playoffs. I don't think that they'll be close to that. I think that they'll be in the bottom 10 for sure, and I feel like they're one of the few teams that we can usually predict to be in the bottom of the standings, hopefully. With New York, they committed to that rebuild, and they know that they're rebuilding, so for me, they're one of the few teams that I know they're going to be bad. One of the other teams that I know is going to be bad is the Vancouver Canucks, who had a 31-40-11 record last season, and they were just hot garbage last season. Their offense couldn't get it together, defense was crap, and of course the goalies were inconsistent. I see the same happening this next season. They're going to have some more hope in guys like Pettersson coming up, and having those youth guys, those great prospects that they have had in their prospect pool coming up in the next season, but I feel like that'll be their only hope, and that'll be their only bright side. For me, the best part about next season for Vancouver is having those guys transition to the NHL, having those guys perform. It's really going to be a retool kind of year, a rebuilding year, and for a lot of those prospects, a really make or break year. But do I see Vancouver being competitive at all? No, I do not. When you add Roussel and Beagle for those just terrible contracts, I don't think that is really going to help your team too much. With Vancouver, I don't see them being much better unless their goaltenders can really start being consistent. Their defense can be a lot better. I feel like they could have a chance, but right now I feel like it's transitioning the year to that rebuilding stage, and they're still in it right now. I don't see them being competitive at all. Next up, I have the Detroit Red Wings, and of course last season they had a 30-39-13 record, and for Detroit, I feel like they are one of the major contenders to be the last team in the league. For them, they have zero star power. They don't have any great prospects coming up besides guys like Zdania and some other guys. But right now, they don't have the star power right now. That's something that you need in this league right now. For them, they have okay depth, but it's very expensive depth. They're overall one of the oldest teams in the NHL, which obviously is not helping them towards their rebuilding phase. It's going to be a really crucial year for a lot of their young guys, like Evgeny Svechnikov and guys like that they need to really develop like they have been. And for Detroit, it really is a transitioning year. They're not going to be competitive. A lot of their guys are getting a lot older, and for them, the youth is going to have to come up strong. But with Detroit, even though they got a lot of old, guys like that, I don't see them being competitive at all, and they just don't have the team built for it quite yet. I feel like they're going to have to take a long time, maybe 3-4 years into that rebuild, but I feel like right now there's going to be a very crucial run for their young guys to really start developing, and for Detroit, I don't see them being competitive at all. I see them being pretty much in the bottom of the dumpster. Next, I had the Montreal Canadiens. They had a 29-40-13 record last season, and for me, they're going to be a very interesting team next season. And while we know that they're a bad team, they could have a few key pieces that could get them a little bit more competitive. The one big thing is Carey Price. Where will he perform? Where will he be in that Vezina voting? Will he be a Vezina-type goaltender again, and will he be the best goaltender in the world like he has shown that? If he can be, the Montreal Canadiens are going to be a lot more competitive, and even maybe a playoff contender if Carey Price isn't that guy, then Montreal is pretty much dead in the water. Their offense is crap, and they might have gotten worse this past offseason trading Galchenyuk. That defense is still terrible. While they have some offensive guys or some young guys that will come up in the system, it's still going to be pretty bad. And of course, it got even worse for them. Shea Weber being out for the first 4 months of the season. That's obviously not good when Jeff Petrie is the best defenseman. It's not looking good for them. Their offense, for what they're going to have to do to make the playoffs, is going to be unbelievable. Carey Price is going to need to be a Vezina type guy, and even then, they might not make the playoffs. It's really that bad. For me, it's going to be like a lot of other teams. It's going to be a transitioning year for their youth. Guys like Juleson will get the chance. Mete will develop. Maybe even Poland getting the NHL chance. It's going to be interesting to see what Montreal is next season. But for me, they're going to be in the bottom of the standings. This team is obviously not ready for any sort of competitiveness. No matter what Mark Bergevin may think, the Montreal Canadiens are not a good team. They're going to have to transition with that youth phase. They're going to have a lot of youth coming up from the systems to have any hope for the future. Right now, it's looking bleak for Montreal, but if a few things could work together, they could be somewhat competitive, but I just don't see that happening. Next, we have the New York Islanders, and they're also a very interesting team. They got a decent young core going there, but of course, they lost John Tavares in the offseason to the Toronto Maple Leafs, so it's going to be a very interesting season for New York. Again, they got Barzal. He's their #1 guy now, but he's still relatively young. That team is overall pretty decently young. They added a few grinders in the offseason, like Leo Komarov and Matt Martin, so it's going to be interesting to see what New York is next season, but it's likely going to be a pretty mediocre season for them. I see them maybe improving by a couple of points just because I think that some of their young guys can come up and play well, but I see a little bit of a same situation as New York was in last season where they still have goaltender troubles. I don't think Grommer and Lehner is going to have a bounce-back season. Their defense, I think, is going to be a little bit better. They're due for a bounce-back season. I don't think Johnny Boychuk is going to be that bad this next season, but their offense, I feel, will stay about the same, which was pretty great last season. So I feel like they're going to be around the same thing, even losing John Tavares, but I feel like they'll have a tiny bit of a bounce-back season. With the New York Islanders, I see them having a little bit of a bounce-back season, maybe being a little bit competitive, but I don't see them being a playoff team at all. And of course, with New York, losing John Tavares is a big blow to that franchise and a guy that they need next season to be competitive. So it's a big blow for them. It's a big thing for their franchise that they had missed out on him. And with John Tavares, he's a franchise-type guy. So for New York, they're going to have to recoup and to really salvage this next season. A lot of their young guys are really going to have to develop and play well. And the team overall could have a bounce-back season. Last but not least, on the teams that I think are going to be bad, at least for sure, you have the Ottawa Senators, who were second to last in the league last season. They had a 28-43-11 record. Oof, that's not great. But in my eyes, the biggest disaster in hockey, the biggest dumpster fire in hockey is the Ottawa Senators, and arguably they got a lot worse this past offseason. Of course, they traded Hoffman for practically nothing, just draft picks and some cap space. Erik Karlsson, we all thought he was going to get traded, so that whole situation is still going to be looming there, kind of like the Matt Duchene situation a couple of years ago with Colorado. So it's going to be an interesting situation there, how that recoups. But with Ottawa, they're going to be a very interesting team because a lot of their players had really down years last season, but I could see them kind of bouncing back a little bit. I can see them being a little bit better than what they were. Nowhere near a playoff team, for sure. I don't see them being competitive. But Craig Anderson, I feel like he would have a bounce-back season again. Erik Karlsson could still be Erik Karlsson. I feel like some of that offense is going to be a bounce-back and have a better year. I feel like the Ottawa Senators, for some reason, even though they got worse on paper, are going to be a little bit better, but still nowhere near playoffs. But I feel like the Ottawa Senators will be just a little bit better than this last season, and that's not saying much because they were terrible last season. But I feel like this next season is going to be a proving point for a lot of their young players, and a lot of their guys could come up. They have some decent prospects in their pool, and they could definitely use them next season. Their core, of course, is aging. They could definitely use some of that. So I feel like it's going to be a weird year for Ottawa, transitioning type year for them, where they play a lot of their youth, which will definitely help them. Now, there's a few teams that could be in that running that I might go over. Chicago might be in the dumpster. I feel like they could have a bounce-back season, but you never know. Buffalo, who was worse than the league last season, I see them having a much improved season next season, but again, they could still be in the dumpster if they don't improve too much. You got Edmonton, who had a terrible year the next season, but kind of like Buffalo, I see them bouncing back next season and having a much better year, so I don't see that happening. There's a few teams that made the playoffs that could be that. Maybe the Minnesota Wild, if some things go wrong, of course. They lost a few guys in the playoffs, but I feel like they'll be a little bit more healthier next season, so I don't think that'll happen. Colorado might be back down there, but I feel like at worst, I feel like they missed the playoffs. I don't think they'll be in the dumpster at all. So while this past season we saw a lot of teams that weren't in the playoffs come up and make the playoffs next season, while this next season I don't see too much, at least what we've been used to, too much of that just shuffle of playoff teams. I feel like it'll be mostly the same, maybe a few changes, but I don't see it changing as much as this past season where it seemed like there was tons of new teams. With this past season, there were just tons and tons of surprises in the standings, and this season I just don't see that much happening. I still see some surprises. There could be a lot of teams like maybe Buffalo that make a splash, but I feel like this season is going to be a little bit more predictable than the last few, where we just saw a ton of surprises. This next season, it won't be predictable because the NHL never really is, but I feel like it'll be a little bit easier, and there will be a lot more playoff teams that are confirmed than there was last. Even though there could be a lot of playoff teams on paper, injuries do hurt teams, and players just having down years hurt teams. So again, a contender like maybe Boston, for example, maybe they got a couple of injuries like Bergeron or Rask, and they just fall down. So really, injuries could make or break their season, and even though the team could look amazing on paper, they could still be in the bottom of the standings because of it. And again, this is why it's so hard to predict these teams, because some teams may rise up, some teams may lower down because of just natural causes like injuries and stuff like that. So that's why it's so unpredictable, the NHL usually. And of course, me predicting that it might be unpredictable could be the terrible prediction here, but of course, there's a lot of teams that are looking to be the dumpster and will probably be the same like that, but there might be teams that shake it up because, of course, the NHL is a wacky league. But to answer the question, which team will be the worst team in the NHL next season, and I have to go through my prediction here, I'm going to guess the Detroit Red Wings. And that's not just because I'm wearing their jersey, that's purely a coincidence, but I feel like they have the worst cap situation in the league. I feel like they don't have enough young players to supplement that terrible, you know, being just one of the oldest teams in the league out there like Anaheim. They don't have too many excuses. Their cap space is terrible. They just don't have the youth. And when you're already bad, when it comes to age, that's just the worst situation possible. But I have another prediction, and remember last couple of seasons ago when Colorado was the worst team in the league and by a mile? I don't think it'll be like that next season. You know, when the Toronto Maple Leafs were the worst team in the league a couple seasons ago, I feel like it'll kind of be that, where there's a lot of teams in the same area of points in the bottom of the league. There'll be a kind of high amount of point total for the worst team in the league. And I feel like Detroit, they could be around that 70-point range, and I feel like that's pretty great for the worst team in the league. So I feel like it's going to be very close between a lot of these teams that are at the bottom of the league, and I feel like it could be a race to the tank. But of course, there's a lot of teams that could be considered for that worst team in the league, but I go with Detroit. You could go with Vancouver, you know, New York, both teams there, Ottawa, Montreal. There's a lot of teams that could be in contention for there. I pick Detroit, but again, it's a good discussion points. You know, which team will be the worst team in the league? It really is fun and unpredictable, but my guess is on Detroit. But that is going to be it for today, guys. If you guys enjoy it, make sure you like and subscribe. Tell me below, who you think, which NHL team will be the worst team in the league next season? I want to know your answers. See you guys later. Goodbye.